Hello, my name is Loren Kellogg. I am Professor Emeritus from the College of Forestry and Oregon State University, and Operations Manager with Intermountain Wood Energy here in Central Oregon. My topic is going to be fire salvage operations and perspectives from our experiences as logging contractors. A little bit about Intermountain Wood Energy. We have been in business for about 10 years. The owner of the company is my son, Scott Kellogg, and I manage a good part of the operations along with him. So we do restoration contracting work. That can be in thinning and in green timber, salvaging dead and dying trees, working in wildland, urban interface areas. And our experiences in fire salvage are over the last, 4 or 5 years. And it started out with, you see that slide on the left there, buying decked logs that had been logged by others and on Forest Service salvage operations. And then we the decks and hauled them off and marketed the wood. We've done that 4 or 5 times. More recently, in the last 3 or 4 years, we've bought, I think it's about 3 salvage timber sales where we've done, paid stumpage for the wood, and we've done the logging and marketing. Our equipment pool, on the left side, you see a main part of our operations which is really a cut to length system consisting of a harvester and forwarder. We're pretty unique in that we have what we call a dual machine. In other words, this one machine here acts as both the harvester, the cutting machine, and a forwarder. So in the top left photo, we're we have the harvester head on there, and we can cut and process the trees. Then we can take that grapple off the end of the boom and put our forwarder bunks on and use the same machine to forward the wood to the roadside. We work a lot with the Ponce equipment made out of Finland and distributed here in North America. We really enjoy working with this company and feel they make good machines. On the left is just kind of a smorgasbord of some other parts of our operations. We have a couple rubber tired skidders with grapples. We have a big John Deere log loader with a processor head on it that allows us to process on the landing with big grapples to pile slash, to load log trucks when we need to. A lot of our loading is with self-loading log trucks, and then we have a wood yard in Redmond. So I wanted to kind of build on that harvester forwarder, because that's a technology that there's some new additions to it, which I think really has some opportunities, growing opportunities in fire salvage and other restoration work. First thing I want to mention, if you're not familiar with these machines, is that it's the bogie wheel design. This is an 8-wheel machine. There's also 6-wheel machines. We have a half track around the front and rear wheels. And basically the bogie consists of a single drive differential with 2 road wheel axles. And so really the point is it spreads the load out over the ground, a bigger footprint with this kind of a system compared to, say, a rigid track machine and a rubber tired skidder. So it really reduces the ground impacts with big machinery, and it also floats over the ground, so to speak. It's able to go up and down over stumps and debris to keep the conformation with the tires and the tracks on the ground. The other one I want to point out that's relatively well, it's pretty new, is again, adding more capabilities to each machine. And this is the Clam Bunk. And you can see it in this photo here. It's an inverted bunk grapple and you can see a better picture at the bottom right, how it would hold the logs. And so this one machine can process the tree and put it directly in the bunk grapple, or pick up bunched logs alongside the trail and move it to the roadside. So there's a lot of capabilities with this type of machine that I'll be expanding on with our fire salvage experiences. The other another option is the steep terrain. These machines have a integral winch to provide assistance for harvesters and forwarders working on steep slopes up to about 80%. This top left photo, you can see there's the synchro winch attached to the front of the harvester, and these men are wrapping a strap around a stump, and then they will be working on this tethered assist steeper terrain. This is probably about 50% here, but again, up to about 80%. So this machinery has those capabilities in addition. And finally, I think a real exciting thing that Ponce has just developed the first of is a fire tank and that we've been testing, and other contractors have been putting a lot of work into that as well as testing that, but there's only a couple of, I think there's going to be great opportunities for it. So basically what you see is a fire tank, 2,600 gallon fire tank, and being able to bring that out with a pickup truck and a trailer, picking up with the grapple on the forwarder and putting it on a logging machine. So your logging equipment can be working, need a fire support for a crew on the ground. It's able to come out and get loaded up and go to work with supporting fire crews, having capabilities to directly draft out water sources like lakes and streams, long distance with a powerful water spray, different kinds of spray. Here, this person is operating it from the ground remotely that could be supporting fire. So there's a lot of variations and opportunities with the bogie wheel-based cut to length equipment that I've just been talking about. And I want to kind of summarize this, just making sure everybody's on board with the terminology. So when I talk about the cut to length system, this is the flow chart of the two components of the operation. We have a harvester. This one could be a 6 or 8 wheel machine that is cutting, limbing, and or felling, limbing, and processing the trees into logs. And then we have a forwarder that follows behind, picking up the logs and moving them to the roadside. Now, I was talking about dual capability. So with a dual, like we have with our operations, it'd be one machine that would be able to do just taking off the harvester head, putting a grapple head on, putting the forwarder bunks on, and doing all those operations. But this machine has capabilities for the Clam Bunk, inverted bunk grapple, for the fire tank, and so forth. So there's a lot of advantages with this technology. With this system, with Slash, it ends up being left out on the site. And generally on our moist forest types, that's an advantage for soil nutrients long term. On our dry forest conditions, leaving too much slash on the site can create concerns about fire resiliency. And it may require a subsequent operation like this forwarder moving slash off the site, or mastication, or something else like that if there's too much slash that's left on the site. In contrast, the whole tree system. Now, the whole tree system is probably more common in your regions in the Southwest where you're based at in dry forest conditions. It's the conventional feller buncher. So this machine just cuts the trees and lays it in bunches. And then we use a conventional rubber tire grapple skidder or some other options and bring the wood to the roadside. And then we'd have a processing operation on the roadside with a grapple processor or a stroke or chipping or something of that nature. So that's the whole tree system. And with this one, of course, I guess advantages and disadvantages, we get all the slash, all the debris at the roadside. And that can be challenging, dealing with those big piles and burning those piles and not having that fire go into the adjacent stand. On the other hand, it can be an advantage with various biomass markets and material at the roadside to utilize. So I just want to make sure that you're all aware of that different technology when I continue to use it in the rest of my presentation. So what I'm going to build on is our experiences in fire salvage operations. I'll talk a little bit more about the appropriate logging technology. I'll talk about our markets, sale planning and layout considerations, and then I'll conclude with some suggestions for moving forward. Okay, so appropriate logging technology, and I think the uniqueness of our operations is a combination. With the equipment I was showing you earlier, we try to use each equipment for the site needs, whether it be leaving slash out on the side or bringing to the roadside. So we have a mixture of whole tree and CTL. Now CTL, I'm going to use that a lot. This refers to cut to length operation. And the general point I would make here is loggers are innovative, and I'm just sharing with you our experiences through Intermountain Wood Energy. But having been in the field for 40 some years, I have observed a lot of ingenuity and good work done by a whole range of contractors. If they know what we're trying to accomplish in managing the resource on the site, they can be innovative in coming up with these ideas. And again, I'm just sharing with you our particular perspective. Okay, so benefits of the CTL fire salvage logging, our experience, looking at our equipment in operations. Remember, you're going to see a combination of cut to length and whole tree. So here I'm sitting in the harvester cab. My son is cutting these trees, and a big factor, a big factor is wood utilization. The harvester head is able to get into very tight areas, cut very small trees, and pull those trees out and utilize them. In fact, we have generally been able to go down to about a 3-inch top, even though the contract will say 5 or 6 inches. We've been able to utilize a lot more of that wood and bring it out and utilize it in our different markets. So that harvester head is very advantageous for doing that. And then building on that wood utilization, sometimes there's a lot of debris on the ground that can be tens of 40 tons per acre or more that needs to be taken out, and it could be utilized. And so a harvester head is able to get in there and work through that jackstrawed wood that's going different directions, pick it up, do the processing, and you can see these small pieces being set aside that would be hard to do safely and economically, obviously, with a manual operation with chainsaws or with a feller buncher head. So that is a real advantage. Secondly, we do, when it's needed, a 2-stage logging. And so we'll start out in a stand like this. We'll come in with our harvester, and we'll cut trees up to about 16 inches, cutting these smaller trees and a lot of these whips back here that are not marked in the contract, that are submerged, we can utilize and clean those trees up. So we'll take those out as well. That will allow us to put our trails in. So we're putting our trails in, opening the stand up by logging the small trees first. Then we come back in on the right side with other equipment for cutting the bigger trees. So we could either use a big harvester head for doing that. Generally, what we've been doing so far are just manually felling these trees, but a lot of the small trees have been removed, so they're not damaged when the big trees come down. We use the same trails. We can then space our main equipment trails out about 100 feet and come in with either our grapple skidder or a clam bunk on the Ponce machine and whole tree the wood out to the roadside. Then another technique with our approach is minimizing equipment passes. So I'll try and describe it. So if I had a video, I could do a little better, but sorry, I don't. But what we'll do is here's the machine on the left, and we'll come into a stump. You can see on these bottom photos, I took this one so you can see the imprint of the machine coming in to cut a tree. And then what we'll do is with this machinery, we can walk the tree backwards, so to speak, to the main trail. Or we're going to bunch other wood. We can walk it back, and then we can bunch it in a pile so that when we move to our primary transportation with our skidder or a clam bunk, we don't have to have repeated passes on that trail to pick up those pieces. We've got it moved out with our low impact bogey wheel machine to main skid trail. So we try to minimize the number of equipment passes. And then there's slash mats with our approach. So what we do, a lot of these sites you can see it burn pretty hot. There's no debris there. It could benefit for erosion control and organic matter to leave some of that material on site. And so we will process about the first 10 feet or so, because we can do that with a harvester head. You couldn't do that with feller buncher head, but we'll process that first 10 feet or so and leave that debris in front of the machine, walk over it, crunch it down. It helps with the cushion provide a cushion on the soil, and it leaves it out there on the site. But we're not leaving all of it out there, just some of it. And then we will come over with our grapple skidder, say, and we'll grapple these trees, and it makes it faster for us, more efficient to grapple this. We don't have to fight through a bunch of these branches to get the grapple over the log, pick it up. So the first point I've been talking about is appropriate logging technology. Giving you an example of Intermountain wood energy operations, the things that we have come up with to do this efficiently, safely, and economically as we can. I think the general point is that the equipment and the systems obviously are forest operation tools. And I put one of these old diagrams I've had for years in here just to kind of get that point across. And when you look at it closely, you'll see helicopters, see a range of skyline systems, and then you look closely, there's a variety of ground-based systems. And all these have their advantages and disadvantages. And our job is to try and match the appropriate system to the site characteristics and the objectives for our management activities. The takeaway message I'd like to leave you with is a general one on this point here, and then I'll go on to the next point, and that is stay updated on the appropriate logging technology in your working circle. There is a lot of exciting new technology out there. What I have found working with my Forest Service colleagues in Central Oregon is that because there's a lot of change, a lot of turnover, a lot of new people, not everyone knows about some of this new technology. Certainly the sale administrator does and may be real excited about it, but it's hard to pass that information on to the resource planners to know that that's available in a particular working circle and has those capability with fire suppression tanks and clam bunks and harvester heads and so forth. And so I would encourage you in general to do that, stay updated on that technology, so incorporate it into your resource planning activities. On to number 2, fire salvage markets. So one is with the Sawlogs is specialty products. I just love this blue stained wood, ponderosa pine wood. And it's interesting, at least in our one mill that is left in Central Oregon, they will either not take blue stained ponderosa pine, or if they take it, there's a lower price for that wood, which makes it hard for contractors to cover their cost with low price for ponderosa pine blue stained wood. However, in Central Oregon, there's a half a dozen small portable sawmills in the area. We've even thought about adding a small portable sawmill to our business model that is cutting up this material, and it's in high demand for a variety of uses with the blue stained pine. So a lot of our bigger logs will go to these specialty markets. The second one is fire salvage, or excuse me, is firewood with our fire salvage markets. We decided not to be a big firewood producer. We kind of stay local within about a 75-mile radius, but we work pretty much about 10 months of the year. We do bundled firewood that we sell to campgrounds, to stores. We also sell log truck loads and are always doing that. And then we sell a lot of individual cordwood loads to homeowners in the area. So that's been a good market for us. You know, the point with fire salvage wood for those markets is what's important is dry logs. And also logs that don't have a lot of black bark on them, and having inventory. Those are three important factors. And so what we do is, you know, to start with, the harvester head is real good at taking a lot of the bark off. And some of the newer harvester heads, like the ones we're working with at Ponce, even have a tighter grip around the stem as it's processing, and will do a better job than some of our older processor heads in taking the bark off. There's also technology used in eucalyptus plantations with a spiral processor feeder rather than the spikes. And I know when I worked in Australia and South Africa, we used that a lot in our plantation, eucalyptus plantations. Because basically what it does is it turns the tree through the delimbing knives to take the eucalyptus bark off, and they need to do that for their markets. And I think it'd be good to have an opportunity to trial that type of harvester head in our conifer plantations here in the western region. And I think there could be some real advantages for using that head to even do a better job of getting the bark off. Secondly is timing. We like to cut our trees and let them sit on the ground 3 to 6 months if we can, so that they dry off, the bark starts slipping on the trees before we move them. And then we continue doing that by having an inventory area. It's important when you're in this business to be able to stockpile logs to play the different markets. And in our case here, we're just using part of our pasture to set the logs out that'll continue drying before we use them. So, and then looking a little broader than just fire salvage logs, and looking at forest restoration in general, you know, that's been a good connection for us too. We've worked hard at connecting into these smaller niche markets, and I know there's a lot of good work going on in developing bigger markets with biofuel and biochar and others and so forth, which is great. We really need that. What we've done as a contractor while we're waiting on those things is develop a lot of smaller niche markets. And so in addition to what I've been telling you about, if we have logs that are appropriate for the log home industry, as you see this man peeling that back, or entries for ranches and things like that, for us using our waste material for debris for landscaping. Are other examples, and one of my favorite is over here on the left side. Actually, these are roots that were pulled. The stems are pulled out of the ground, and this log home company then cleans that up and makes these stairways with that fluted tree that really adds a nice flavor to it. And they have been buying some logs from us. So that, I think that's a key with this wood is this material is to look for these niche markets really hard, and that's what we have done. On to the third point of my discussion here, and that is sale planning and implementation variables that affecting logging feasibility. And so if you're in this type of business where you're a person that lays out timber sales or administer timber sales or talks about it, if you're in the in the academia, these are the variables. And it's just a short list here to give you a flavor of that what affects either it's going to be a positive sale or a negative sale, it's going to sell or it's not going to sell. And it's right on the margin when we're working with these dry forest conditions and fire salvage. And it's certainly the hauling road conditions, the hauling distance, the yarding distance to the roadside with the equipment, the terrain, whether it's steep or flat or broken up, soil types, stand prescriptions, volume per acre removal, tree species. Ponderosa pine in our area said is worth a lot less than Douglas fir and lodgepole pine, and the degree of heterogeneity in the stand, and also efficiencies in unit layout. It takes a lot of time to lay out these sales and mark every tree, and of course we're doing other taking other approaches, D by D and D by P, and I think there's opportunities there with more virtual boundaries. But in addition to that list, I put here, I've highlighted in blue a couple of examples that I'm going to specifically share with you about variables that impact fire salvage feasibility and economics, specifically tree size, equipment mobilization, and unit size and seasonal restrictions. So tree size. So we look at the harvester head cutting different trees, and we're generally not cutting big trees with we're cutting trees that are less than 18 inches. But I can tell you, having done time studies and having run machinery, that it takes just as long to cut a bigger tree as it does a little tree. And the bigger tree is going to have more firewood pieces in it. It's going to have more volume in it. And so when we look at a cost per cubic foot or cost per cord or per ton or whatever, if it takes us just as long to do the big tree or the small tree, but we're getting more wood out of the bigger tree, our costs come down considerably. And so that is a big. And sometimes I get a bit frustrated looking at stands, and these are all dead trees in this particular photo. But when we're moving the machine around, think, well, we finally get a pocket with a few bigger trees to take out. If we have 14, 16-inch trees, 5, 6, 7-inch trees, there's not very many, and that would really help us. And I know there's other factors to consider, but I'm just talking about our logging economics. That's a big factor. Another one is equipment mobilization, moving in and moving out. We moved these two pieces of equipment not that long ago. The move was less than 75 miles. This big green machine, the bill for that was over $2,000. Onset machine, a little cheaper, a little different type of a low boy to do that, not needing a pilot vehicle. It's about $1,000. And so it's expensive to move this equipment around. And so again, as a contractor, it's tough, or we get frustrated when we see so many seasonal restrictions with hot weather, cold weather, wildlife, so forth. And you can't just leave equipment sitting on a site. You usually have to move it around from one area with different restrictions to another. And the unit size is a big factor. This was one of our fire salvage jobs. It turned out to be a pretty small area. It was only 20 acres, but adjacent to those areas, there was still a lot of dead trees that would be visible by highways that would be nice to, I think, add on to the sale and to provide us more volume to cover some of those mobilization costs. And so those are factors that affect our cost. And my takeaway message here, and I don't mean to be complaining, I just try to get some points across and realize that there's a lot of variables that resource planners and experts have to consider in making decisions. But my takeaway message is that I've always talked about successful harvesting operations, and there's 4 important components I've always talked about, and they always demonstrate in our operations. They can have different words to them, but basically they're these 4 concepts, and they're objectives that we have to meet in our timber sales, in our NEPA planning, and so forth. And obviously they get more detailed, but there is an environmental objective or ecological objective, which includes protecting the soil, water, wildlife, and other forest resources. Got to have that. There's a social objective, which involves working with communities and sharing what we're doing, and these days working a lot with collaboratives. And there's also, it's got to be economical, including, and that includes harvesting productivity and the costs. And I've showed you some ways that we try to make that as efficient as we can. And then there's a technical feasibility, just including including equipment feasibility, the size of the tree it can handle, the terrain that it can operate it on, and safety consideration. And what I've observed over a career of 45 years or so of talking about it, doing research and doing it now, is that in the past, we had a lot more balance, I think, consideration with these 4 objectives. And certainly number 3 and 4 came into more play. We had Forest Engineering Institute program at Oregon State University that produced a lot of FEI graduates, had a lot of knowledge in these areas to plan accordingly for considering the economic and technical feasibility. And I just see a lot of that being lost these days, and a lot more focus on these areas, which is important. I get it, we need to do that, but these areas, I don't think are getting as much attention as they need to. And so that's a takeaway message I would leave you on this particular slide. And so with that, moving forward to I think it's my last slide here, more of a positive perspective. And again, I hope the positive messages come out here, because I really enjoy what we're doing, and I enjoy knowing what you're doing, and working a lot with my former students in different areas here. Fire salvage management, it is working together. And I often use this triangle for the different components of people and organizations that are working together. So I start out with the public forest and private forest, you folks, landowners, resource specialists, managers. I think the more that you can put up pilot projects and demonstration projects, outreach. We're doing a fair amount of that in Central Oregon. That is helpful for people to see these things on the ground, to have that on the ground discussions with collaboratives. They're very helpful. I think that's a good way moving forward. Secondly, in the research area and monitoring, workforce education and training, another real needed area for moving forward. And that kind of gets at the education loss that I was talking about that we have in a lot of the aspects of harvesting. Two good things I'd point out, specifics, would be the Southwest Ecological Restoration Institutes. My colleagues at Northern Arizona University, Dr. Hansu Pan, Rich Edwards, are doing a tremendous amount of neat research there on mitigating site impacts with new technology, trying tethered assist operations on steeper terrain, developing markets, new markets, international markets for biomass material, and putting on outreach programs with other colleagues they have in other universities and ecological restoration units. The Forest Service currently has a logging and road institute that provides modular programs about harvesting systems and planning and roads. And if you don't know about that, I would encourage you to learn more about it and see about going to those workshops. Lisa Ball is involved in that program. Bob Rich, Jeff Hallbrook, other names that you may recognize, and you know it's a great program for us. And the last one is the component is the, and I said they're innovative. I've just been sharing you some of the examples that we've had and innovations that we've done to make it. Manufacturers are always looking for better ways to do the job, and I just call out one example there with the Ponce simulators are just amazing in training people in an indoor environment with simulators before going to the field and building up that workforce where we need that. So that is it. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to seeing all of you in our virtual workshop series here in a couple of weeks and following up with questions.